Judicial Watch initiated virtually all the major litigation that's resulted in voter roll cleanup in the last decade. The Justice Department has been, for all practical purposes, AWOL, and frankly has looked to Judicial Watch to do this to the degree they're even interested in it. But what's interesting is that the settlements, so you go to court and you fight, and it's one thing to go to trial. So most of our cases, when we pursue them, settle, right?
Right.
And they're not settled with, it's not where these leftists go in and sue their friends and they settle and they get a sweetheart settlement, kind of like Hunter's plea deal. We go in and sue California, Los Angeles County, New York City, extremely far left jurisdictions, and it says a lot about the power of our legal position that they settle with us. And in the case of California, I think the numbers are really, truly remarkable as to what we were able to accomplish through that settlement. And to the credit of California, rather than waste money, they just did the right thing legally, as we thought the law required.
They sent out 1.6 million notification letters. And, this takes patience. There's not instant gratification with these lawsuits. 2 general federal elections later, they duly removed, at the time there were 1.2 million registrants who never responded and who hadn't been removed in some previous tranche.
And that number was confirmed to us earlier this year, right?
Yes, it was.
So that's in California. In New York City, so California, I want to go back to California. They hadn't cleaned their rolls in 20 years.
Right. And see, this is part of the story too. There's always another part of the story that makes the government not look particularly good. But as soon as the motor voter law was passed, and as soon as the integrity provisions were included, the government, in the form then of the Janet Reno Justice Department, went to war against the NVRA, at least against the integrity provisions, and came up with this interpretation that it's not enough to send a letter and to wait 2 federal elections. You need secondhand, this is their phrase, secondhand reliable information to justify even sending the letter. Now, that's not in the statute.
What does that require, sending detectives out to find out where people move?
Ideally, I suppose. But under that interpretation, they gave California a pass.
It essentially freezes, because the agencies really can't get that secondhand credit.
Yeah,
that's difficult. That's difficult to achieve. Assuming it meant anything, it's a difficult hurdle.
Yes, and if you pass it one way, does that mean that some interest group is then going to sue and say, well, that's not reliable enough? And then you have fights over the word reliable, which are doubly difficult because the word doesn't appear in the statute.
So California,
it's made up.
So California said, oh, we were applying the law as Bill Clinton told us to apply it, but we agree we'll apply the law as Bob Popper is telling us to apply it.
Well, to be more blunt about what happened is Janet Reno made a deal with California, then with the Pete Wilson administration, and said, we will sue you, but we will drop our lawsuit if you agree not to enforce state law that enabled the NVRA. And they agreed, and they duly didn't enforce it for 20 years until we came along.
So LA County has cleaned up of 1.2 million names.
Yeah.
The state, as part of the settlement agreement, has reminded other jurisdictions, the local counties, that they need to really take this seriously. Have the other counties? My perception is no, but I know you've been looking at the data recently. Have they gotten their act together?
No, and absolutely, emphatically not. There are counties that still are in the sort of 20-year limbo of, now 20 plus years of never having enforced the statute as it was meant to be enforced. And I did want to add, in 2018, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling that rejected this whole reliable write-in to the statute that was never there in the first place, and just said, you can pick any reason you want to send a letter, and once you do and 2 general federal elections go by, these people must be removed. So that's what everyone who could read the statute as it was written always thought.
And you're too humble, because that was a validation, and an issue was the settlement that we had come to with Indiana. Ohio, excuse me.
Sure.
And the Supreme Court of the United States, the left didn't like the idea that the rolls would be cleaned in Ohio.
Yeah.
Or in an effective way. And the Supreme Court said, well, which Judicial Watch in Ohio came up with, and which we're applying in other states, that's right. And,
Yes.
and certainly that was a signal to states like California and New York City, I mean, which was also a mess, and they settled almost.
Tremendous help.
They settled almost, I wouldn't say immediately, but in terms of litigation,
As close to immediately as you can
it was
get.
like months after we filed, if I recall.
They removed 525,000 registrations that were due to be removed within months of our lawsuit. And we concluded a settlement agreement with them, and there was never any question there that it was our lawsuit that caused them to make these removals. They
right.
told us that. Other states have fought that notion, even though we did cause them to.
Well, this is classic. You send the letter, right? There's a warning letter. You say, look, your rolls are out of whack. You file a lawsuit, and they immediately clean up, either tied to the letter they don't tell you or after the lawsuit. And then we're like, well, they cleaned the rolls. It looks like they got a system in place, so we're going to shut it down. And then they say, well, we're going to do that anyway. Well, the people can judge for themselves whether that would have happened or not. So New York City cleans up their rolls, so we get 1.2 million out of California this year. New York City's 450,000 or so.
525,000.
Oh, so it's
now.
even more than that now.
Yeah.
It's over 500,000. That's incredible. North Carolina, we sued.
Yeah, North Carolina fought hook
They
tooth and nail the idea that we had caused them or incented them to remove anyone from the roll.
So they removed what
430,000.
So 430.
I mean, it's you have to count it a different way, but I mean one of the terms of our settlement was we'll settle this, but you have to explain to us why there's been a spike in removals, and they sent us this tendentious, politically complex explanation as to why removals had been like this and then spiked once we sent them a letter. And it is not convincing, and there I would say that our intervention caused them to remove 400,000 to 500,000 registrations that would not have otherwise been removed in a timely way.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.